its center in Jerusalem, the other northern kingdom with its own capital in Samaria. Now, the northern kingdom was first led by a man called Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. And he has the unfortunate distinction of being mentioned frequently in the history as the man who made Israel to sin, set up golden images and so on to stop the people going back and forth to Jerusalem. He introduced them to idol worship. And the northern kingdom that he established did not really enjoy much by way of prosperity at all. For some 250 years, they were led by 18 kings from 10 dynasties. And that tells you that there were frequent exchanges of power and great instability in the nation. Now, of these 18 kings, Jeroboam II was probably the most significant. He was the king in the days of Hosea, and he's mentioned actually in verse 1 of this prophecy. And the very name that he chose tells us a lot about him, does he not? He's modeling himself on that first Jeroboam. He too was going to be, by his own way of it, a great leader. Now, actually, in the days of Jeroboam II, the nation did get on quite well in terms of economic prosperity, but spiritually, they were going downhill very fast. And in the year 721 BC, their enemies came and destroyed Samaria, and the whole northern kingdom really vanished thereafter from the pages of history. That's a situation in which Hosea ministered, and he ministered towards the very end of that particular period, from about 760 BC to about 723 BC. So he was very close to the time when Samaria was destroyed. He makes no mention of it at all in his prophecy. He may have been dead before it actually happened. But he was one of the final voices to that nation as the Lord calls them back to himself. And as you read your way through the book of the prophet Hosea, and it's a very unusual book for a variety of different reasons, which I won't go into just now, but as you read your way through the book, you see various different illustrations being used to demonstrate the message that the prophet was sending to the people. In chapter 10, for instance, the previous chapter, there's an illustration used there of plowing, and plowing up the old ground, a replanting, a new beginning, as it were, a springtime, and a change of days. Verse 12 of chapter 10, for instance, sow to yourselves in righteousness, reap in mercy, break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord till he come and rain righteousness upon you. Well, that's the illustration that we have in chapter 10. In chapter 11 here, it's a different illustration. It's the illustration of Israel as a child or a son. And that's introduced to us here in verse 1. When Israel was a child, I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. And from that first verse of the chapter, he builds up that illustration and applies it in a number of different ways throughout the passage. Israel as a child or as a son. Now, there are 4 lessons that I want to draw out of this chapter using that particular structure. I want us to notice, first of all, excuse me, I want us to notice, first of all, that this chapter teaches us about Israel, the privileged child. Israel, the privileged child. Now, can all think of privileged children. Maybe when you were growing up yourselves, there was somebody in the village or in the town who you knew was quite privileged and had certain things maybe that other people didn't have. Well, that is precisely how it was for Israel. They had certain things in their history, in their early beginnings, which nobody else had. They had privileges that were special and were unique. And these privileges went all the way back to the beginning. First of all, it went back to their birth as a nation. Went all the way back to their birth as a nation. And that's what he's talking about in verse 1. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and I called my son out of Egypt. You know the history yourselves. The Lord took them out. We're going to go even further back. He took them out of Ur of the Chaldees when he called Abraham to follow. And then later, some 400 years later, he calls the now much increased family of Abraham out of Egypt and out of Egyptian slavery, and he established them as a nation. And they owed their very origin to God's grace and power. They owed it entirely to God's grace and power. There was no possible way in which they could ever have been established unless the Lord had done it and brought them out with a strong hand and planted them in the place of his choosing. They would never have been able by themselves to bring to pass one fraction of God's promises to Abraham, and yet in his grace, all these promises were brought to pass. So Israel was a privileged child. Way back at the very beginning, the Lord was blessing them and giving them privileges. And in the same way, the Christian owes their very life, their very origin, physically and more importantly, spiritually, to the Lord. The origin of it all. It's the same origin. It says here in verse 1 that the origin was the love of God. When Israel was a child, I loved him. Why did he establish them? Because he loved them. And in exactly the same way, as far as his people are concerned, they owe it all to the love of God. The sovereign, electing love of God underpins everything. There's a phrase there at the end of verse 1, which is applied actually in Matthew chapter 2 to the Lord Jesus Christ himself. Out of Egypt have I called my son. You remember when he was that period of time in Egypt after they fled from Herod. And Calvin's comment on that is this: as the Lord took the body of his church out of Egypt, so what length he took the head. As he took the body of his church out of Egypt, so at length he took the head. And the experiences of Israel in the Exodus are a foreshadowing of the church's experience and of the Savior's experience too. So Israel was a privileged tribe way back to their origins. But the privileges extended beyond their origins. The privileges extended beyond their origins, because not only were they privileged at their birth as a nation, but they were also privileged in growth and development. Verse 3. I taught Ephraim also to go, taking them by their arms, taking them by their arms. It's a picture of a little child being led in its first baby steps. Just know the way it is with a toddler. We fellows may be very keen to go, but you can't really. So you're Sort of, oh, well, that's a picture we have here. They owed their origin to God. But he didn't just simply leave them there. He taught them. He led them. He kept them standing up. He had taken Israel, helpless infant, and taught it to walk and eventually to run. This is what I did for you. I created you. And I was there in all of these beginnings, in all of that growth and development. And in the same way, friend, the Christian too. Tended carefully so that they grow in grace. He taught you to walk in the ways of God. Did he not? He held you up. We were singing about that in Psalm 18. He taught you to walk in the ways of God. Walk worthy, Colossians 1:10. Walk in love, Ephesians 5:2. Walk as children of light, Ephesians 1:5. Walk as wise, Ephesians 5:15. He taught you in all these ways to walk. And see how gently he does it. Gently he does it. By your arms he held you up. Let's just go back to Psalm 18 actually. Verse 36 we sang, and in my way my steps thou hast enlarged under me, that I go safely. It's the same picture. And my feet are kept from sliding. God accommodating himself to their weakness. Israel, the privileged child, back in their birth as a nation, but privileged also in growth and development as the years went by. But they were privileged as well because they knew the Lord's healing and keeping throughout the passage of the years. Healing, keeping them safe. Verse 3, the end of verse 3. They knew not that I healed them. Now I'll come back to the they knew not in a minute. But just focus on this for a second. I healed them. I healed them. Even when they went astray. Remember that incident in the book of Numbers where the snakes come into the camp of Israel? But all healed them, did he not? From the result of their sin. All thine iniquities who doth most gracious be. With thine diseases all and pains doth heal and even heal. And in the same way, we look back and we see his healing of the heart, his healing of the soul, his keeping. We go to him and we find that he recognizes the symptoms. We accept the wisdom of his diagnosis and the work that is done. Israel, the privileged child, their birth as a nation, their growth and development, their healing and keeping. There was this privilege as well, and I spoke on this before, but I want to just highlight it by itself. That love that was there at the beginning, that love was lavished on it. Now, you know, some people sometimes, and maybe you as a child that you knew growing up, it's your own experience, happily, that love is lavished on it. Well, verse 4, I drew them with the cords of a man, with the bands of love. He drew them to himself with love. He drew Abraham to himself in love. So he had drawn them as a people. He's drawn all his people to himself. What a privilege you were drawn to. Now the word drawn here, the Hebrew word that's used here, it's a strong word. It's actually the word that's used in Genesis for taking Joseph out of the pit. Now if you're drawing somebody out of the pit, they had a pull. Yet I drew them up, I drew them out, I drew them in, I drew them near, all of that and more. Oh, it needed power. It was love allied with power, because no man can come to him except the Father draw him. What's the matter? The drawing of the Father. Power of God is the power of his love, drawing sinners to himself. That love comes out in the last clause of verse 4. I laid meat to them. Oh, they weren't abandoned. They weren't left. Again, maybe we knew people like that when we were growing up, and they were the very opposite of the privileged child. They were the unprivileged child, maybe in the village or wherever. There were days when there wasn't much on the go and much food or whatever. Well, this was the very opposite of that. Israel was a privileged child. Oh, see how graciously the Lord has dealt with them. Verse 4, I was to them as they that take off the yoke on their jaws. Yoke of Egypt, he took it away. We sang about that in Psalm 124. The yoke of sin, he took it away. Set free. The Christian is drawn and led, as the tutor leads the pupil, as the guide leads the traveler. So we have Israel, the privileged child. But then secondly, in chapter 11, we have Israel, the rebellious son. The rebellious son. And again, maybe we can think back, and there were people who we knew, and they were quite privileged in a whole host of ways. It didn't always work out that well. Some of them would become terribly rebellious. Think of a man in our own village, and that's exactly how it was. He became an out-and-out rebel. Well, Israel, the privileged child, who you would expect to be just so, turns out to be a rebellious son. Verse 2. As they called them, so they went from them. They sacrificed to Baalim and burned incense to graven images. Verse 3, we're told that they're forgetful. They knew not that I had healed them. Well, I think it's closer to the truth to say that they chose to forget who had healed them. They chose to overlook it. They chose to put it away from their minds. It wasn't that they didn't know it, it's that they chose not to know it. Just as the other man chose to forget Joseph. I spoke earlier about the snakes in the camp. The Lord delivered them. He healed them. Made the brass serpent, you remember? It was on the pole. What did they do with the bronze serpent? They worshipped. They turned it into an idol. They knew not that I had healed. O Israel, is a rebellious son, serving the creature rather than the creator. This rebellion, as we're told in the chapter here, was deep-seated and determined. Verse 7. And my people are bent to backsliding from me. Though they called unto the Most High, none at all would exalt him. In verse 3, the prophets have called them back, but none exalt God. Well, we've all seen the rebellious child, the rebellious teenager. Well, here he is, Israel. And is it not the confession of the church on the Thursday of communion? Everything they read in the Word, they find in the book of their own heart and their own experience. We without fathers sinned have. Psalm 106. Is it not so? Who can say that in the light of all the privileges they've had from the hand of the Lord, they have been the good child, if you like? the obedient child. All too often we have been the rebellious son. They have turned everyone to their own way. So we have Israel, the privileged child. We have Israel, the rebellious son. Thirdly, we have Israel, the chastised offspring. The chastised offspring. Whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth. We're told that in Hebrews. And the Lord chastises and brings them back. And he had often done it in their history. Verse 5. He shall not return into the land of Egypt, but the Assyrian shall be his king, because they refused to rebel. Well, they go into the wilderness, and as we saw, they didn't behave themselves at all well in the wilderness. You know, you or I might have sent them back to Egypt. There you go. Back you go. It was that good. Have your fill. Well, Egypt is a symbol of slavery and exile and suffering. But as the centuries passed, as they failed to learn, as they failed to repent, they will not go into Egypt, but there'll be a new Egypt. The Assyrian shall be their king, because they refused the Lord's kingship. He's saying, very well, I'll give you a new king. You don't like my rule? Give you another rule. That ruler will be the Assyrian. Called, but he refused. And they had nobody to blame but themselves. The Assyrian shall be his king, because they refused to return. Then in verse 6, we're told of the judgment that falls, and the sword shall abide on his cities, and shall consume his branches, and devour them, because of their own counsels. Hosea is saying it's coming, it's coming. The Assyrians are coming. The Assyrians in 7:21 did come. And the sword abode on his cities and consumed his branches. From his judgment falls, the wages of sin is death, the way of transgressors is hard. You know, it's a great blessing that the Lord chastises his children and brings them back to himself. There's nothing worse than an unchastised child. It's the road to ruin. The Lord in his mercy brings them back to himself. So we have Israel, the privileged child, the rebellious son, the chastised offspring. Finally, we have Israel, the restored heir. The restored heir. Though he chastises, he does not cut off and cast off his people. We have a divine resolve here. You would think as you read your way through the Old Testament, you think he's going to give up on these people completely. Northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, they all end up in exile eventually. He'll make a new people for himself. Not at all. The day comes when they return to the land. He doesn't give them up, though they deserve it. Verses 8 and 9. How shall I give thee up, Ephraim? How shall I deliver thee, Israel? How shall I make thee as Admah? How shall I set thee as Zeboim? My heart is turned within me. Here's a divine resolve. He's not giving them up till they deserved it. God is speaking here in human terms. He's explaining his sovereign purposes in terms that they could understand. How shall I make thee as Admah? How shall I set thee as Zeboim? These were two wicked cities. They were destroyed. In the Old Testament, you'll find reference to them in Deuteronomy 29. Oh, he said, as bad as Zeboim and Admah, can't give you up. Another way will be made. The other way is the way of Christ as the sin bearer and as the substitute, which leads us to the Lord's table and to the Lord's day. There is a route directly from Hosea 11 to the Lord's day, to this coming Lord's day. There is a divine resolve that they will not be given up. Not one of them is lost. Not one of them. He is the good shepherd who finds his sheep and who brings them into the fold. He is the king who gathers his subjects and who at last brings them within his own city. There's divine resolve, but there's also divine tension here. Again, the Lord is speaking here in human terms. My heart, he says, is turned within me. You know, it's as if divine justice and divine mercy are in tension. You know, he's saying, my heart is turned within me. On the one hand, you deserve to be cast away. On the other hand, there is covenant provision and covenant promise and covenant obligation and love. It's as if there's a divine tension. It's not really a divine tension, of course. That problem can only be resolved at the cross. Only there can justice and mercy meet and peace and kiss mutually, as it says in another psalm. We have divine resolve. We have this divine tension, but we have divine purpose and character. Verse 9, I will not execute the fierceness of mine anger. I will not return to destroy, for I am God and not man. Ah, yes. Yes, I am God and not man. The angry man is intent on vengeance. God has a higher purpose of grace. So I will not enter the city. I will not enter the city. In other words, enter it to destroy it. He entered Admah and Zeboim in Deuteronomy 29, and he destroyed them. Now, ultimately, of course, the day came when he did enter into the city. The Assyrians entered into Samaria. But even in that, Hosea is saying, there will be a remnant left. I will not utterly destroy it as Zeboim and Admah. I will not wipe them off the map forever and ever. I will not execute the fierceness of mine anger. And it's not your hope, Christian, that he does not execute the fierceness of his anger. That he is God and not man. There is divine purpose in it all. Mine's gone to that verse in Lamentations now. Quoted right. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. So we have Israel, the restored heir. There's divine resolve. There's even this apparent divine tension, but there's divine purpose and character. And finally, there is divine transformation. Verse 10. They shall walk after the Lord. Well, you wouldn't think so in the earlier verses. They shall walk after the Lord. He will have a people. He will bring back his people. And he will keep his people. And they shall walk after the Lord. No thanks to them. Thanks entirely. And what's he going to do? Well, he'll roar like a lion, we're told. They shall walk after the Lord. He shall roar like a lion. When he shall roar, then the children shall tremble from the west. The lion you have here is roaring for its young to protect them. And that roar strikes terror into the heart of the enemy. But it's a signal of safety to the lion cubs that roar. Verse 11, they shall tremble as a bird out of Egypt, and as a dove out of the land of Assyria, and I will place them in their houses, saith the Lord. It's a picture there of a migrating bird. And the trembling, it's not the trembling of fear, it's a trembling of eagerness. It's really an intimation that the day would come when they would be restored and returned. They will come as the dove out of Assyria. It is all laced